Welcome back to the New Indian Express's ThinkEdu Conclave 2021. As we step into a new normal, we talk about the lessons we need for this new world. We have a day full of intriguing and thought-provoking conversations planned for you, so sit back and enjoy. Our next speaker is working on a project which maps the human mind. And what's better, it is an Atmanirbhar project. Please welcome Infosys co-founder and chairman of Auxiliar Ventures, Kris Gopalakrishnan. Senior journalist Kaveri Bamzai will also join the conversation.
Hello and welcome to yet another session at the ThinkEdu Conclave. I have with me Kris Gopalakrishnan, who is not only one of the co-founders of Infosys, but also one of the leading lights of research on the human brain. He's in fact donated money for 3 chairs at the IIT Madras, if I'm not mistaken, and of course the Brain Research Center at the Indian Institute of Science, which he initiated and sort of created in 2017. So it's been about 4 years since that center came up. And the focus, if I'm not mistaken, was on aging and to understand how the human brain ages. What have the learnings been so far? And of course, then we'll talk about artificial intelligence because that's really something that the world seems to be quite concerned about, and rightfully so. So, what are the learnings that you've had so far in all the research that's been done?
So first of all, Kaveri, thank you very much. Thanks to the new Indian Express Group for inviting me for this very interesting session and topic, a topic that's very dear to me.
Yes.
The Center for Brain Research is established around 2015, so it's now about actually 6 years.
Okay.
Since the center was established. It took a little bit time to understand, what or come up with what needs to be done. And the two major programs that the center is involved. One is longitudinal study of 10,000 people over 10 years. These are people in Srinivasapura village in Kolar district, and people around 45, 50 years of age, and to see how they age. And so we are collecting their health parameters, their brain and cognition parameters. We are taking MRI data. We are also taking their DNA sequencing data, and to see how they age over the 10-year period. And if they develop some, let's say, disorder, then we go back and study the data to see whether we could have detected it early.
Right.
Were there some early biomarkers. This data is probably the first data set that we will have of Indian subjects over a 10-year period, looking at their brain function and things like that. So it's in that sense very, very important data. We are in the, this whole thing kicked off in 2017, as you rightly said, this longitudinal study. And so we are in the early stages of starting to get enough data to look at any trends, etc. Um, there is also an urban cohort. So this is the rural cohort, which is being also tracked. And one thing, which came out, these are of course early observations, was that it was felt that stress levels in rural areas would be lower, and hence strokes would be lower. But to our surprise, we found that stress levels are same or similar in urban cohort and rural cohort, and incidence of stroke seems to be similar. So anyway, these data points will have to be analyzed, but these are the kind of inferences that we can now start making from the data that we are collecting. Of course, the cognition and the brain function will also be studied in detail. The second program or the project the center is doing is mapping 20,000 DNA sequences of Indian subjects, or mapping DNA sequences of 20,000 Indian subjects. This is a Department of Biotechnology sponsored project, of which Center for Brain Research is one of the participants. And the reason for kicking this off is that again, when you need to look at uh, genetic data, understanding Indian uh, subjects. We need large databases, and we found that no laboratory in India had such large databases. At most they would have 500 or 1,000.
Right.
So let us collect all these labs together, create a central repository,
Mm.
and that's the genesis of this project. This will also be used to probably create a chip which can accelerate and reduce the cost for DNA sequencing of Indian subjects. So
Right.
these are some of the uh, plans for the Center for Brain Research.
Right. So there's quite a bit of concern about the kind of information, the kind of data that the big four, the GAFA as they're called, have about the world, and especially India. We're big users of whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook, perhaps their biggest market. So is there a concern? That concern, is that valid? In fact, someone recently even went so far as to call us the biggest thought laboratory in the world for these four big companies, and how Facebook alone maps something like 6,000 parameters of every individual. So where are we headed in terms of these machines knowing us better than we know ourselves?
A very important question that we need to ask, we need to have an answer to or a strategy to.
Right.
Clearly, machines know more about us than we know ourselves because machines collect, they organize this data, and then they can run algorithms on a particular individual's data, but also population level data. So you can compare one individual versus all other people, compare, let's say, Indians versus other ethnic communities,
Right.
or male versus female. So population level studies can be done. And and you know one, this data gives you so much information about the person and how to influence that person.
Hmm.
So unknowingly, we can be influenced to buy stuff that we don't need. Unknowingly, we can be influenced to vote in a particular way, or think in a particular
Yeah.
way. It can influence us without us even realizing that we are getting influenced and things like that. And
What is
that's
called
the,
brain hacking these days.
yeah, in some sense, so
Yeah.
that's the 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 dangerous part of having so much data and things like that. And the business model that drives this, which is seemingly um, free services, right?
Yes.
Right, so they induce you to use these services and provide this data by saying that the service is free. You can connect with your friends, you can
Right.
connect with your relatives, communicate with them. So we need to now think this through. I don't think it's unique to India. This is a
Yeah.
problem now the entire world is facing. And the concentration of this data with just few companies is where the challenge and the problems are. And the world is only just trying to figure out how to combat this. The concentration of power is huge.
Right. So, just as Infosys was the leader in the IT revolution of the 90s, and then, of course, in the 2000s, it really took off. Is there no is there no one out there, because you deal with so many young startups as well? Is there no one out there? Is there no idea out there that can become the next big Facebook, but for India? And where we can sort of compete with these four big companies, but on our own terms. And what would these terms be? There is also the concern that this artificial intelligence, because it's based on Western models, is perhaps skewed towards what is called Western values. Is that something that's also a concern? And can we in India create our own Facebook, our own Googles, our own really big behemoths which collect data, if data is the new oil, which it is?
So there are so many questions in what
I know, sorry.
you have asked. First of all, the information technology industry itself is very, very varied.
Yeah,
You have the hardware providers,
right.
you have the software like the operating systems, you have the horizontal applications like the search application or the social networking application, your vertical applications like the ERPs that run the banks or run the retail industry, etc. And then you have the services companies. Now, what India has done very well is in the services industry, we are the world leaders. If you look at the top 10 companies in the world, 5 are Indian. They're still 5 are still Indian. In the vertical
Which is the
applications,
topmost company in the services sector globally, sir?
depending on the market cap on a particular day, it could be Tara Consulting Services,
Okay,
right?
right.
They're right at the top. There are one or two. Accenture is there. TCS is there. So um, that's an area we are dominating, and I believe that we will continue to dominate because we have a base today. We have a professional base which understands how multinationals work and how global companies work, and we have the services ethos in India, the culture in India. The second part is the vertical industry, and we are starting to actually create products here which are going to be global products. In the banking services industry, today the top 2 or 3 products are actually of Indian or Indian origin. From TCS, from Infosys. If you look at even the Oracle product, genesis of that is actually from India, and they acquired that company there. Where we don't have, and then the e-commerce application, for example, right, in the payment applications. So in vertical applications in SaaS, etc., Indian companies are starting to dominate and create unicorns. We believe that the number of unicorns will become 100 pretty soon. This year we are looking at 50, and when it comes to that size, you will have significant companies coming out of India. Where it's going to be challenging for us is to create these horizontal platforms like iOS or Android or Windows. There are only 3 in the world. Then these horizontals like a search engine or a Facebook or something like that, a social media network or a Twitter and things like that. That's going to be challenging because we need to come out with a new paradigm, and then we need to have the marketing muscle, the investment dollars to make that into a global entity. I'm not saying it will not happen, but that's a little bit more difficult for us to do.
Among the unicorns, among the young people that you mentor at Axelor, and you invest in looking at their potential, do you see anyone who's interested in this area and is headed towards bigger things?
Well, Geo is supposedly coming out with its own devices, its own operating system, its own social media solutions, etc. So hopefully, we may have somebody from India sort of dominating at least one market, which is the Indian market, which is 20% of the global market.
Right,
The other area where I'm actually quite optimistic is gaming
right.
and esports and things like that. I expect, again, because we are large consumers,
Yeah,
expect some big names to emerge out of India. If you look at the top 2 cricket e-games, etc., again, these are companies from India, Nazara, Jet Synthesis. So, it is possible that we will have some global companies coming out of India in some of these new areas.
so what are the things that we can do at an individual, at a corporate, and at governmental levels? Again, 3 questions, I'm sorry, to sort of retrain our brains to adapt to this new world. Yuval Noah Harari has often talked about the whole idea of knowing ourselves. We also now have to know ourselves better so that we can compete with the machine, which knows us so well. What can we do to at these three levels to do this better, to play this game, this global game better?
First and foremost, we need to have sufficient capacity and capability in this new area of AI, machine learning, knowing that technology, how to use that technology, contributing to the development of that new algorithms, etc. That's the first aspect. And the hardware infrastructure necessary to run these run these algorithms, because they require really high performance supercomputing infrastructure and things like that. So that's the first aspect of it, and we are starting to invest in that. We are as a nation talking about the need to uh, create capacity and capability in AI, including research, so that we can come out with new algorithms and things like that. The second part of this is data, right? Now, data, we definitely generate huge amount of data, but who owns that data? I believe the ownership is clearly, ours, because the data belongs to us, but it is not stored by Indian entities. It is actually collected and stored by uh, entities outside the country, and we need to figure out how this data is available for our researchers, our startups to play around with and come up with new solutions and things like that. The government is looking at policy around data, looking at localization requirements. So even if it's collected by a foreign entity, it's made available locally. Government is, our own committee has recommended that, the non-personal data committee has recommended that this data must be available for research as well as for innovation, should be shared for innovation, etc. And the third aspect is both capital and human resources. So we need to train enough number of people in these new areas, create an excitement in getting into these areas, and the capital required to invest. See, sometimes we forget that the capital is anyway coming, so why do we worry? But what happens is, if that capital is foreign capital, these entities, these unicorns, become actually foreign companies. Ownership becomes foreign. So domestic capital, Indian capital, must actually come forward to own these entities and invest in these companies and keep the ownership Indian. I believe so.
Are you hopeful of that, sir?
Well, I'm very, very optimistic and hopeful about these things, because see, we have seen significant changes, right, in India. Where did a Flipkart come? Of course,
Yeah.
today it's owned by
Mm.
Walmart, but where did it come from? Right, India only.
Right.
We're talking about 100 unicorns, right? So I'm very optimistic about these things, but you know, this is only the beginning, and we need to um, create a positive virtuous cycle. What I mean by this is, you create new knowledge, you create innovative companies, you make them, scale them up and become very large, create wealth, and that wealth then gets invested back into research, creating new companies, and you create a positive virtuous cycle. This is how the Silicon Valley works, the capitalism works, etc. We need to unleash that engine in India, and this can only be done as an ecosystem. So we started with the brain, right? Brain sciences, I believe, is the most exciting
Absolutely.
area today, or one of the most exciting areas today. The whole fourth industrial revolution
Yeah.
is called the intelligence revolution,
Yeah.
and it involves all these technologies. So we need to create a positive virtuous cycle in India today of uh, research, innovation, entrepreneurship and startups, wealth creation, such that that wealth creation gets invested back. We need to excite and motivate our youth to actually focus on some of these areas, ask these questions about, what are the advances in brain sciences, and how can we leverage these to solve new problems or solve problems in new ways, and then create this positive virtuous cycle.
Right. So, linked to this is the new education policy that the government has come up with. Have you had a chance to look at it and see whether it is headed towards this direction?
It is, they're talking about problem solving skills. They're talking about creativity. They're talking about multidisciplinary studies and things like that. You can take different subjects and accumulate enough credits. They're talking about transferable credits. They're talking about getting in and getting out of the educational system at different points, etc. All these, I believe, are important changes that we want to bring about, so that you create the right skills, which is about problem solving, creativity, and things like that, research, and you also give the flexibility for students to take on things that interest them,
Right.
and with different options and things like that.
Right. Where are we to in the study of brain sciences at a lower level, at the level of undergraduate studies or postgraduate studies? Where are we at that level?
Uh, so this is a growing field in India. We don't
Right.
have enough capacity,
Right.
and we need to, we need to attract more people. We need to invest more in research. We need to grow this field in India, and the field is actually very, very vast.
Yeah.
All the way from the hardware, understanding the human brain as an organ, understanding, the for example, the neurological disorders, and we didn't talk about that, and that itself is a huge field. Then taking those understandings and applying that to the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, the computer revolution and things like that, and then looking at the way in which brains can be influenced with the data that we collect, to understand human beings, and to understand then uh, questions which are going to be or we are going to try to address in the future, things like what is consciousness, what is intelligence, can we think about completely mimicking a human being, how do we prevent ourselves from getting influenced by machines, things like of that nature, and the ethical questions about do we allow the machine to take decisions with human life, where human lives are involved,
Right.
etc. These are very important questions, and we need. So this field is actually very, very vast.
Right. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, is there something in our own ancient texts that can also help us sort of look at some of these questions? After all, when we talk about consciousness and intelligence, these are things that a lot of our past greats have addressed through history and time. Is there something that we can use from there and actually make it valuable for
Hello.
contemporary times?
I believe so. We have a lot of practices. See, I see the difference between what we have in India and the knowledge that we have in India
Right.
and the Western knowledge. The knowledge in India is based on from practice to the lab.
Right.
We have several practices, and now we need to understand why we do certain things and why it works, right? Yoga, for example, or meditation, right? Why it works, now we need to understand. Whereas the Western world is, you actually experiment in the lab and then bring it to practice. So lab to practice. So we have a lot of ancient knowledge. We know that many of those work, and 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 I think, the beauty of yoga and meditation is that it allows us to control the mind. There is nothing in the Western science that allowed people to control the brain other than medicine, whereas here, we train ourselves to control our brain. So there are things that we need to take from our ancient knowledge and modernize it and bring to the lab so that we can understand why it works. That's one aspect. Now,
Right.
the second aspect is the philosophical aspect.
Yeah.
See, Western civilization or Western knowledge systems are all about the individual being the paramount,
Right.
right? Whereas in the Eastern philosophy, we think society comes first,
Right.
the group comes first, and the individual is subservient to the society. And
Right.
so peace, harmony are more important than sometimes individual freedom.
Right.
So, the understanding of both these, the differences, what is good about each of these, and marrying these two, I think will also be very, very important to think about the future. And a lot of the issues related to what we talked about, these companies having so much data about us and knowing a lot of things about us, they actually talk about individual freedom is very important. We
Yeah.
say, no, the harmonious society is also equally important, or maybe sometimes more important.
Right.
And this, I think, will have these debates will have to continue.
Absolutely. But I mean, let's start those properly. I think that's what we need to do. We need to seriously engage and inform ourselves too. There's not enough information out there, do you think, among the leaders of corporate and political India and civil society? Is there enough information out there to engage in informed debate?
See, there is actually. It's just that not many people are engaged in this.
Right.
We are only starting to invest in research, right?
Right.
As businesses, as philanthropists, government has been investing in research, and government is a primary investor in research.
Right.
We need to now have industry and philanthropists invest in research, and I'm trying to encourage them to do that. And that's how the discussion and debate and knowledge systems are created. And we need to scale these up definitely in India, because these are very, very important questions for the future of not just India, but the future of the world.
Indeed, you have somebody like Jack Dorsey of Twitter who practices Vipassana, so he perhaps is using the best of our tradition to, inform his practices as well. It's interesting. And we ourselves perhaps have lost out on that somewhere. It's an interesting thing, no?
Yeah, yeah. So the interesting thing here is we still don't actually look at the science behind it. There are
Huh.
a lot of Vipassana practitioners in India,
Yeah.
but we need to bring the scientific timbre and try to understand what is the science behind it, why it works, etc., and demystify it.
Yeah.
We keep it as a mysterious thing still, and I feel,
Yeah. You're right. We still
so
think
that's
of
the
it
difference.
as partly mumbo jumbo, that, but it has obviously tremendous benefits, and we've seen that in so many people in so many cases. Can we talk a little about the neurological disorders, which we completely skipped? Could you tell us a little about what we are uncovering?
So, the opportunity here is to understand how, as the brain ages, we lose some of our mental capacities and
Yes, that's
capabilities,
true.
and 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 understanding that is very important, because we are all going to live longer,
Yeah.
right? If you look at the data, it shows that average uh, longevity is increasing, and
Right.
and it's also seen that because of our lifestyle, and this is the challenge, because of our lifestyle, people above the age of 65 develop, maybe 1 in 5, 20% of people develop some kind of disorder, dementia,
Right.
etc. We probably write it off as aging related
Mm.
forgetfulness, etc. But some of those people may have actually medical conditions that need fixing, etc. So understanding these are very, very important. And again, we don't have good data. Is the incidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's same or lower or higher, right? We are increasingly seeing that lifestyle diseases like hypertension,
Right.
diabetes are higher in India because again, our sedentary lifestyle, food habits, etc. Now we need to fix them because they also trigger
Right.
stroke and dementia and things like that. So, we need to understand this whole thing if you're going to live healthy longer, if you're going to reduce our disease burden. And then, we need to then figure out, can we actually find cures?
Hmm.
And this will be a contribution to the entire world, because the entire world does not have a cure for Alzheimer's, for example,
Right.
does
Right.
not have a cure for Parkinson's disease. So
Right.
this is something that we can provide to the rest of the world. Now, if the incidence is lower in India, and
Right.
then we find out that it's because of our spices, or we
Right.
use turmeric and things like that, and
Yeah.
it's supposed to have some benefit to the blood and circulation, the brain, etc. If that is so, then this is something again we can contribute to the rest of the world. Another study that I'm supporting is the whole herb brahmi,
Right.
right? Brahmi is supposed to help memory, right? Improve
Right.
memory and things like that. Again, we need a scientific study around these things and understand why, if it works, why it works, right? So these are the things that we can actually uniquely contribute to the rest of the world.
So there'll be many more turmeric lattes in in America, I think.
Yes, exactly. People are lapping it up, and
Yeah.
but the science behind it, if it
Yeah.
works, why it works, should also be understood.
Right. As our brain ages, of course, we lose certain things. What do we gain as our brain ages? Because sometimes you become smarter, don't you?
So, see, there are two aspects.
Yeah.
One is our ability to respond, our ability to remember. We slow down things, and that's part of aging. But that experience that we
Yeah.
have and the ability to connect the dots and come out with, let's say, inferences,
Right.
come out with the responses. Um, is expected to become better as we age, as we get more experienced, etc. And again, the science behind it we need to understand. And how can we train ourselves to do
Hmm.
that? See, what is beautiful about the brain is that till the minute we die,
Yeah.
it's actually constantly learning,
Constantly
it's
learning.
constantly
Yeah.
evolving. So
Right.
can we train ourselves to learn new things as we age? Just like we can exercise our muscles, we can
Yeah.
exercise our brain also.
Yeah. Yeah.
Train to learn new things, learn new languages, new capabilities, and things like that. In fact, that's one of the ways people believe that we can keep ourselves mentally young, is
Hmm.
to, try to do new things, try to do things differently, and all of these things people can actually learn. If you have certain habits, change those habits deliberately, do things
Yeah.
differently. It trains our brain to do certain things differently.
So youth is highly overrated.
Uh, See, today now, 60 is the new young,
What
right?
we, yeah.
So, people are going to live, to 90, etc. And we should try and see how we can, you know, um, prolong the period of being, um, you know, contributors, good citizens.
Right.
I think that's what we need to think about. And it also then opens up other things like, what is the retirement age? When should people stop working? I believe people should never stop working. They should continue to work till they die, right? So those are the things that we need to think about.
So I wanted to ask you a personal question. What do you do to keep yourself mentally young? Because you're involved in so many things, you meet so many young people. you're investing in the brain. What are the things that you do as a daily practice, or as something that you've retrained your brain for, to keep yourself going?
First is physically fit. I think
Yeah.
you can be mentally fit only if you're physically fit, I believe.
Right.
It's part of being meant. So I do exercises every day now. Morning exercise, and evening I try to go out for a walk.
What do you do, sir? Do you do yoga, or do you do
It's a
do you go to
mix
the gym?
actually.
Okay.
No, I don't go to the gym. I do it at home. So I do some yoga, some aerobics, and
Right.
sometimes I do elliptical.
Okay.
So it's a combination of all these things. And the evening we just go out for a walk. It's a partly a relaxation also.
Right.
Go to
Right.
the park and walk and things there. And the second is, you need to interact with people. You need to learn new things. So I read for about an hour every day,
Right.
different subjects. Sometimes
Right.
it's novels, sometimes it's you know some science subjects or history. So keep reading stuff and things like that, and interacting with people, because people interactions are very important. From a you know you have knowledge, but how can you um, convey that knowledge so that somebody else can understand?
Yes.
It requires you to put that in a certain structure.
Hmm.
That itself, I believe, reorganizes your thinking, reorganizes your brain.
Right.
And then new insights may come out of that. And a lot of the things that I've now starting to understand better, I'm only starting to understand better, has happened in the last 5 6 years. Even computer science, now I understand better because of my trying to understand the brain, etc.
Right. What have you read recently which you really enjoyed and which you would really recommend to us? Because I know that you're very generous in your recommendations. You're always sharing what you've just read or just heard. And that's really wonderful, because it gives the rest of the world, way forward. What have you just read which you really enjoyed?
So, I recommend Yuval Harari's books, The
Yeah.
Sapiens and
Right.
Homo Deus. That gives you a glimpse of what happened and what is
Right.
possibly going to happen.
Right.
That I recommend.
He
Uh,
also studies Vipassana. So interesting. He also practices Vipassana.
no, I find that more and more people who um, you know are thoughtful, think
Yeah.
about these things, are looking at meditation, etc., because they understand that's how you make the brain more active and more
Mhm.
powerful,
Right.
right? It allows you to, I think, restructure your thoughts and things like that.
Right.
Then I read stuff on genetics and gene and things like that. There are multiple books in these areas. I'm the third aspect I'm reading is about AI, machine learning. The latest, it's not a book, it's the massive report the US has come out with.
Okay.
Just released, it's about 750 pages. It's a
Oof.
government report on what US needs to do in uh, AI, machine learning, the fourth industrial revolution, the new
Right.
technologies that are emerging to retain their leadership position. It's a
Right.
fantastic document. I just started reading it, and I recommend you. I'm trying to think about how can I give you a pointer to that. Actually, it's about 750 pages. It's a national security committee that has been created,
Okay. Right.
and the report was just in February released.
Okay. So I'm sure if I look it up, I'll find it. So just one last question before going. We talk so much about the India-China rivalry. The real rivalry is also in AI. China is far ahead of us, isn't it? How did they manage to do that in the last 10 years, and we sort of, lost the plot somewhere?
So they had a strategy around AI machine learning 10 years back. We are starting to build a strategy. So we are
Right.
kind of, behind in that. Even the US has admitted, and if you look
Yeah.
at this report is all about how US can regain that.
Right.
And the way you can regain is investing in research, investing in people, investing in entrepreneurship and startups, because these are the companies that create the products and the services,
Right.
and government working together with industry and academia to develop and execute this strategy. It can be done. I strongly believe that it can be done and it must be done. We're starting to do that. We need to um, be at it, and we need to take the time and the effort and the resources required to make that indeed happen. I am confident about our people, right? So what we now need is the systemic response and the resources that are required and the focus that's required.
Right.
Then we can do it.
Yeah. So, is there any leader in this field, independent, attached to a university, whom you really track and whose ideas you look forward to in India or the West, in AI and the brain? Someone whom you follow?
Well, there are multiple people. When you look at the science and the machine learning, Jeffrey Hinton and people like that are the scientists behind that. Of course, most of these people are now either with Facebook or Google or Microsoft or Apple. They've recruited all these people. Then you look at reports such as this. There is a very good report which China produced 5 years back.
Right.
By 2030 they wanted to be dominating in the area of AI and machine learning. And they gave responsibility to industry, they gave responsibility to academia, they put money behind this, they attracted the best people from outside the country to come to China. So they did a lot of things to make it happen. It just requires us to I think we need to focus on this. See, just like we're focusing on space, right, and we are a leader in space, right? So just like that, I think we need to truly believe that this is going to transform, impact all our lives, and then we need to set specific goals and targets and put money behind it and make it happen.
Right. Is there anyone in India whom you would recommend one follows in this area, sir?
Professor Kamakodi at IIT Madras is one person who's knowledgeable, who's trying to work in these areas. But, it's not just an individual, right? We need that complete system behind him.
Like your center.
Yes, we need multiple of those centers. We need large researchers. We need large number of startups, and we need money.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kris Gopalakrishnan, for informing us. I think it was a fascinating discussion. There's so much to learn about ourselves and about our brains, and it was a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for talking about mapping the human brain.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy that session? We hope you did. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If you want to check out the entire schedule and other sessions, log on to eventexpress.com, newnanexpress.com, or edexlive.com. Thank you for watching.